on Jesus, all things are possible. I can mount on wings like eagles and soar. When I call on Jesus, mountains are gonna fall. 'Cause he'll move heaven and earth to come rescue me when I call. Is another It Is Possibly Tuesdays with Sanyo. And we are in 2025. It's the season for us to thrive. It's the season for us to do more than survive. We have arrived and we're going to make the most of 2025. I have a special guest. I know she's going to drop some nuggets of wisdom, and I know you're going to be blessed and inspired and motivated, and you will resume your day, night, evening, weekend with much vigor, having listened to our conversation today. As usual, let me start with, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for prosperity and not for disaster, to give you a future and hope. But Jesus beheld them and said unto them, with men this is impossible, but with God all things are possible. Once again, welcome, welcome, welcome. My special guest today has the initials N and R. And I'm going to have her tell us a little bit about the N and the R, who named her, where she was born, and a little bit about her background before we get into some other matters. Welcome.
Thank you. Well, hello everyone. My name is Novia Reed. I am a native of the beautiful island Jamaica, and I'm a believer in Christ, and I have a love for traveling, for people, for culture, for diversity. My background is in the field of social work. I've practiced therapy, and I have my PhD in marriage and family therapy, specifically focusing on couples. And now I'm just focused right now, just for the moment, on not just for the moment, but for the time being, I'm focused on really helping women reclaim their authentic identities. So I'm really happy to be here. I'm happy to be with Sanjo. So thank you for having me.
Lovely. Um, I just like something a little bit more that you've said now. Women reclaiming their authentic self. And we're going to delve in that some more. But before we get to that, Jamaica.
Mhm.
What was life like for you in Jamaica? Where were you born?
I was born in Mandeville, but I was raised in Saint Elizabeth. And so I don't have that many memories from Jamaica. I came up here when I was 12, but I do remember because I was young and I was having issues with my heart. So I do remember that. And for some reason, one of the memories I have is just being in school. Stats, St. Elizabeth
Yeah.
Technical High School was
Technical,
next to us.
yes.
So I don't have that many memories from there, but the one memory I have was, just being in school and this little boy hitting me because I left a scar here. But other than that, I love Jamaica. It's a beautiful place. I love the culture. I love going home. I still go home, at least try to once a year with my sister and myself, but sometimes the family goes. So I love the culture. I love the people, and I just pray that God will, bless and nurture the land.
Lovely. So we have a connection because I grew up in Manchester.
Ah,
Have
okay.
friends who went to States, I
Mhm.
went to West Indies College and Manchester High School. So
Okay.
yeah, we have
Nice.
that.
Nice.
Um, now you've spoken about the fact that you had a problem with your heart. Tell
Yes.
us a little bit about that. How did that affect your childhood?
So really, at first, it affected me more so in my toddler stage, because when I would run and play, I would just get like really tired. And so I couldn't do much
Along.
activities as the other kids. So I had open heart surgery at age 2 at Yale New Haven Hospital. And so for a while, that corrected the issue. So I was able to play and move about like kids normally
Yes.
do. but then the issues resurfaced. And so I had to have another open heart surgery at around age 11, but that really took care of it. Thank God. People came together, to really help me get the surgeries that I needed. And so the second one really solidified, just me getting back or just having really good health. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Okay. Wow. Those are major surgeries for
Very
a
major.
body.
Yes, yes, yes.
And you're okay now.
I'm okay now. Like, I thankfully, thank God, which is a miracle in and of itself. Like, I take no medications, I have no stents, none of that, none of those
Mhm.
things. And so when doctors sometimes, know or they learn of my history, they're like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yes, I'm fine." They're really amazed at how well I'm doing,
Mhm.
based on the surgeries that I've had. Not even so much the surgeries, but the condition that I had because it was a rare
Yeah.
heart condition and
Ah,
it affected affected the heart and body in different ways.
yeah.
So they're just really amazed at how well I'm doing.
Yeah.
So I just really thank God for that, honestly.
Yeah. You are a living testimony. Look at
Yes,
that.
yes,
From the age of
yes,
2, you have been
yes,
a
yes.
testimony. And in terms of your health, what are some of the special things that you do to maintain good health?
So there was a time, I think it was like a few years ago, my doctor said, "Hey, your cholesterol is really high." And she said, "Hey, I want to put you on medication." I said, "No." I said, "I'm not going to take any medication." So I researched everything I could about foods and fruits that were good for cholesterol. And then I don't know if I had one at the time, but I know I eventually bought a smoothie maker. And then I just started researching recipes. And so literally, when I went back to my doctor, I think my cholesterol dropped from 220 something to 178 without medication. And for me, it didn't just make my health better, but it proved that I could really improve my health naturally without medications. And so I've still had a somewhat of a battle with it, but I know that once I'm disciplined, once I am focused, once I'm committed, I really get good results. So I do a lot of smoothies. That's really my breakfast. Basically, every morning I have a smoothie. Then I started juicing about a year ago. So I've
Mhm.
added juicing. I work out. There's a vitamin I take because which is vitamin D.
Yes.
I don't get
Yes.
enough sunlight,
Yes.
so
Yes.
I just
Yes.
take
Yes.
that as a vitamin. I just try to drink water and I do work out at least 5 days a week. So for me, that's important. But I would say what was a turning point for me was when somehow in some conversation or environment where I was, I just heard the Holy Spirit say, "Do you not know?" Which is the verse in the Bible, "Do you not know that your body
That
is
your
a
body is a
temple?"
temple.
And that just shifted my perspective to really help motivate me to really take better care of the temple.
Temple.
And I connect this to temples, to actual temples, specifically in Asia. When I was in South Korea, I visited a temple and I noticed that you couldn't take pictures, you couldn't speak loudly. There was just such a deep reverence. You had to take your shoes off. They had
Joseph.
such a deep reverence for a physical
Physical
temple.
being.
And
Yes.
God just used that to really say to me, if they have such reverence for a physical temple that is man-made, how much
Exactly.
more should you have reverence for your body
Body of
and temple that I've actually given you? And so that was
yes.
just really a turning point for me. So I'm not perfect with my health, but I really try to like really take care of it as best as I can. So
Wow. It's amazing. The creator has put everything together so well, and he just says, take care of it. And we don't do
yes,
very well with it. Something
yes.
has to shock us, and then we say, Whoo, I need to go back to
Yes,
the manual, go back
yes.
to nature, and it nature does what it is supposed to do for us because
Hmm.
it was
Hmm.
created for us
Hmm.
to use and to enjoy. Um, and you've mentioned something I think with most people who don't live in the Caribbean, who don't live in a tropical climate, we all have to be taking vitamin D because we are not getting enough of that good old sun,
Yeah.
but there people are put in our pathways to help us, to guide us, and then it's for us to
Yeah.
make the decision, as you have said, to be disciplined, to be committed, to stay the course, because this is what God has given us to take
Mhm.
care of, and we need to be good stewards of it. Now, you went to States and then you migrated to the States. What was the transition like for you?
Well, actually, Stats was near my school, but I didn't go to Stats, but it was a very difficult transition for me.
Mm,
I struggled.
mm,
Being in middle school, there was just definitely a culture shock. There was definitely challenges with acculturation because in Jamaica we wore uniforms. The language was different. My accent was really thick at the time, and so I was also battling with the scar from my surgery. So all of those things really just created a difficult transition for me. And what made it even more difficult was the bullying.
mm.
And yeah, that really left a lengthy impact, I would say, on my life. And just it was really a difficult transition. Very, very difficult.
What helped you to navigate that era?
That's a very good question. It wasn't healthy, but it did the job. And so for me, my answer to what I was going through was just to shrink and just to like really dim down myself, my capacity. It wasn't healthy, but I
Mm.
thought it was helpful because I felt like if I would just stay out of everybody's way and make myself less visible,
Oh,
if I
yes.
wouldn't read aloud in class anymore, then they'd stop picking on me. So my solution then was just to make myself less visible, but it really cost me in the end. And so that was just really my way of coping. I spoke to my dad. He came out to the school that, his efforts and intentions were phenomenal. It didn't necessarily have the impact that we would have wanted it to have because, the school at that nature, and I think just with bullying as a whole, does not get the awareness that it should because it does have severe psychological impact, on children and on
Yes,
youth
yes,
and even as
yes,
adults. And
yes.
so, he did his, best effort to advocate for me. But I think when we
Mhm.
were thinking about being in that era, it wasn't something that was treated with the care that it should have
Care.
been treated with.
Yes. I fully understand the idea of dimming your light so that nobody really notices you and that you are preserving yourself
Yeah,
and short-term self-preservation, but with long-term detriment. You
definitely.
said that it cost you.
Mhm.
Would you care to elaborate on that? In what way did it cost you, and how have you been able to repair or to um, claim back the cost?
So it really cost me because instead of really earning what I could have earned, I earned C's and less grades, and I barely graduated high school.
Mm.
Um, and so I really should have failed, not graduate on time, but this was actually something that created a shift for me, which was my 12th grade English teacher. I actually had her for ninth and 12th grade. So when you have a
She knew
student,
you.
twice, you get to know them a little bit, at least in my case. And she got to know me. And I remember I only wanted I bought my high school yearbook and I threw away the whole yearbook, but I kept one page. And the page I kept were words that she wrote to me.
Oh,
And she wrote to me in the book, she said, never settle for less than your best effort, despite the challenges and obstacles you face, and then you would have achieved success and inner peace. And her words just changed my perspective because even though she didn't know fully what was going on, she knew that I was better than what I
Then
was
what you,
giving.
yes,
And so her words were really a turning point for me to really shift and say, yes, you endured the bullying, yes, but you have potential. And when you live up to that potential is when you will experience success and inner peace. So that was a powerful shift for me. That's what helped me navigate graduate school. And I was able to actually, I was still struggling in early college and undergrad, but I started to get better in graduate school and I finished my master's in 8 months instead of 2 years. So her words really propelled me to
propelled
kind of
you.
say, hey, you have this potential, live up
Yeah.
to it. And then when I finished my doctorate, and this is not by any means to, to like really boast about it, but I think God has such a powerful sense of humor because in my whole educational journey, I had never achieved honors. And when I finally finished my PhD, I graduated with distinction. And God just used it to say, yes, maybe those other years you hadn't achieved it, but at the pinnacle of your
Pinnacle.
educational
Yeah.
journey is when you achieve this. So I just look at it and say, God had a sense of humor, and He really just helped redeem me with her words and me just figuring out, hey, this cost you. You're living beneath your potential. And so that is what I would really say really helped a lot. And just a lot of self-awareness really helped me get back to this place of really living up to my potential. Yeah.
That is so powerful. There's an educator, I think she died recently, Rita Pearson, who gave a
Mhm.
TED talk, and she said that every student needs a champion. And
Yeah.
that teacher was your champion. She
Yes.
championed you and
Yes.
she poured into you,
Yes, she did.
and it
She did.
resonated and it caused you, it set that spark
Hmm.
alight. And you realize, no, I don't need to dim my light in order
No.
to allow others to shine. I have a light, I have a spark, and I need to allow it to ignite. That
Yes.
is so fantastic, because so many of our children are bullied, and sometimes the end result has been fatal.
Yes.
And indeed, bullying has had a lot of negative if impact on young people and on people in general. And if you don't have someone who pours into you, as that teacher did, and as Rita Pearson said, that every student should have a champion, it could be really lonely and very
Yes.
isolating for you. And I think that's why school is such a major plays such a major role in
Hmm.
everybody's life, because it's where you spend most of your time
Yes.
growing up, and
Hmm.
it should be a safe place, and people who enter into the profession of teaching should be nurturing and very
Yes.
observant so that
Yes.
they can see when things are not going right and pour into the children so
Mhm.
that school is that safety net for them. um,
Yes.
I've worked in many institutions where there are teachers who are they're good teachers and they nurture the children, and the children always remember them years
Hmm.
after. And it's so profound that
Yeah.
I don't know if you have it as a little plaque on your computer or on your wall, but you were just repeating what she said to you,
Hmm.
because it has become a mantra, for
Definitely.
you. Now, you left high school, and what were your plans at the end of high school? Were you going to work a lot of money, make it big? What plans did you have?
Because my GPA wasn't, the greatest, I didn't really have many plans. The one university that I applied to said no.
Mhm.
So I just said, okay, well, I'm going to go to Miami-Dade for community college. And so I went to Miami-Dade and I completed community college. Yeah, I got my associate's degree. And then for some reason, just social work, I declared social work as my major. And I didn't know everything about social work, but I would eventually learn a lot about
Yeah.
it.
Yes.
And I just chose it. It came to me, I chose it, and I stuck with it from my Miami-Dade to then FAU and then FIU, and it just stuck. So my goal was to really just to be an effective social worker. I didn't plan to
Mhm.
do therapy or become a therapist, but again, God just has a way of, navigating your pathway. And so when I finished, getting my associates, I went on to undergrad and then moved on to graduate school. And then in graduate school, I learned about becoming a licensed clinical social worker and just all the opportunities you could really just get into with that license. And I decided I was trying and door after door. There was just something about medical social work that I found appealing at the time. And so
Yeah.
I wanted to do that, but just everywhere I was applying to, no one would hire me. And I'm saying, God, I remember just getting so angry and frustrated at God. I'm saying to myself, why aren't these people hiring me? But then I learned that you needed 2 hours of
Oh,
clinical face-to-face interactions to be able to achieve your licensure. And so being in medical social work would not have afforded me that licensure. And so I said, oh God, now I understand. But so I eventually applied to a local community agency where I actually became a therapist. And so I
okay.
was able to get my hours for licensure, but also another requirement of getting licensure is that you have to be supervised by someone who has been licensed for 5 years, and they had to meet other requirements. And
Nervous.
that came to me at no cost. And that can be pretty costly because you're getting weekly supervision for about 2 years. So that could have been very costly for me, but it was included, with my work at the agency. So I really just thank God for
Yeah.
that. And then things just started to change and navigate from there.
Indeed, God says, I know the plans I have
Plans I
for
have
you.
for you,
You don't
yes.
know them, but I know. I see
Yes,
the end. I
yes,
know what's
yes.
going to happen. And if
Mhm.
you follow my directive, if you walk in my path, it will just
Yes,
unfold for
makes
you.
sense.
Um,
Mhm.
you constantly talk about God in your narrative, and you did say you're a believer. Were you always a child of God, or did this happen because of something?
Well, I consider, I know people may have different perspectives. This, I just believe, like God made me, so I'm his child. So I would just consider,
Yes.
me a child of God. But in terms of belief and relationship, I was
Mhm.
raised in the Seventh Adventist church, so of course, I went to church. I participated in everything you could
Pathfinder.
think of: Pathfinder, Bible Bowl, youth leader, Sabbath school
Yeah.
superintendent. I loved it.
Yes.
But relationship, that was
Mhm.
different. I don't think I really, I knew how to pray, of course, but I don't think
Mhm.
I personally cultivated a relationship with God until years later. And I
Later.
think just me being in traumatic situations and calling on God is what really started to nurture that relationship. And, just really seeing him in new ways. I think, definitely having a heartbreak, is what kind of nudged me into the arms of Jesus to kind of
Mhm.
find comfort.
Yeah.
And so from there, our relationship just started to really build. So, yeah, that's the answer.
Um, you've spoken about trauma, and trauma is something that we are becoming a little bit more aware of and
Yes.
intentional about. So, in many school settings, we tend to be using a trauma-informed approach to work with children. So we're not so judgmental. We're more about unpicking situations and offering solutions and recognizing that everybody has trauma and we deal with trauma differently and that sort of thing. Now, you are you've walked the path of social care, social work, therapy. What would you say is your biggest concern with your clients or with the persons that you have to interface with as it relates to trauma?
I just think it's just different. I think one of the things I've experienced is one of the things I've experienced, and this has been a shift for me in my work too, is like when I've come to work with a lot of clients, because traditionally the platform, our field has been that way, is that they become, a lot of clients come in with the trauma being the focus, which is naturally
Mm.
expected because they don't know another
After,
way. But one of the things I've learned is that having to relive and constantly talk about your trauma is not necessarily the most effective way and can actually cause re-traumatization. So I don't focus necessarily. I've met clients with a lot of different issues, whether it's infidelity, whether it's low self-esteem, figuring out their purpose. And so for me, I've learned not to focus more on the issue. I learned to focus more on what do you want to get out of working with me?
mm, outcome.
Because when you get so focused on the issue, that can become the focus, that hope and solution and change becomes less of a driving force and the problem becomes center. And it really should be the opposite. What you want, your strengths, your solutions, your desired uh, change, that should really be the driving force. In my opinion, in my work, it is. At least I can't say that's what it should be for everyone, but that's what it is for me. That has become
Yeah.
my driving force. It wasn't necessarily always this way. It wasn't always this way because, we learn different modalities in school and approach. But it's funny because it's the approach that aligns so most with me. I feel that it fits my personality so well, but I also think it fits in the way God sees us as well. When God sees us, God is going to correct us, but He's not focused on the problem. He's not focused on the sin. Like He's focused on moving us forward and healing. And to me, talking about constantly, it's not ignored, but constantly dwelling or talking about the problem, to me, I've just found it to be counterproductive. And even in my life, okay, if I have a problem, I don't want to spend, I used to, so I know, I don't want to spend hours wailing or talking about the problem. I want to really figure out a solution. But
Mhm.
again, it's so evident in the Bible. We can find therapy in the Bible because if you really look at it, God, just gave this to me when I was reading the story. When Samuel had, already anointed Saul, and he said to him, God said to Samuel, "How long will you mourn?" And I found it so fascinating because God never said, "Don't mourn." God
Mm-hmm.
said, "You have mourned
Yes,
long
yes,
enough for
yes.
Saul." So there's a place for mourning, but it also lets you
Mhm.
know that perhaps
There's an
even
end.
contrary to Christian belief or other people's belief, mourning is not meant to last forever because God specifically said to Samuel, "How long will
How
you mourn?
long?
I
Yeah.
have another king for you to anoint." So
Anoint.
it shows not just how God is to us, but it shows also the beauty of the approach that I take when it comes to just working with people, but also an approach that we can take. Give yourself the space that you need to heal, to mourn, to do whatever. But at some point,
Got. Yes. Yes.
there's a
Yes.
future ahead that we want to get to. And so there's always a delicate balance where I don't ignore, a client's problem. It's acknowledged in the same breath as, okay, with this challenge that you're having, if we were to work together with this challenge, what would you like to have achieved from that work?
Yeah.
So,
And that is so uplifting.
mhm.
What do you think needs to be done within the church setting to deal with things like trauma?
I think education is, of course, important, but I think one of the things I find is not that I don't think the church as a whole necessarily wants to ignore trauma, but I think conversations about trauma reveals insecurity and unpreparedness to deal with it.
Mhm.
Because the truth of the matter is that a lot of pastors, for example, provide pastoral counseling. They give a lot of counseling, but are they fully trained and equipped to give the counseling that a lot of people present to them when it comes to certain issues. So I
Mhm.
think there has to be a broader conversation about powerfully equipping pastors. I personally feel that I don't know the extent of pastors trainings, but I think there should be a specific component or even certification in some form of counseling for every pastor. It shouldn't necessarily be a separate track, but it should be embedded in their
Get it into the
coursework.
training.
Yeah. But I think also it has to be done in a way where the pastors are not burdened in a sense too, because they have a significant responsibility. But to answer your question, I think definitely preparing pastors a lot more with knowledge, competencies, or even skills to be able to deal with more diverse issues that are coming up now, but
Yeah.
also just have certain experiences where people can come together. I believe it was about 2 years ago, my former pastor had a series of mental health experiences where different speakers and facilitators came in and had open conversations about depression, anxiety, just so many different things. And it took the
Yes.
nature of conversations, but it also took the nature of it could take the nature of panels. It could take the nature of
Yes.
having a facilitation, a workshop, or a retreat. So beyond the education, of pastors, I think there has to be more intentional effort in creating spaces where we can have meaningful conversations about trauma, about mental health, and also breaking the stigma in the church regarding, mental health. So
Yes.
that's what
Yes.
that would be a good point to begin.
Yeah. It's interesting because trauma, mental health, or well-being, it's almost becoming a buzzword now. And a lot of people are buying into the idea that taking care of yourself and your mental health is not selfish, but it is essential to your being able to be a good citizen so that you can actually do what you need to do to ensure your society is well. Because if you are stressed and overworked and
Mhm.
frustrated, then you can't pour
Mm-mm.
into anybody in a positive way. You are just there as background noise and you're not helping, which is what our Christian duty requires of us, that we bring a light rather than we add to the darkness. Um, in your practice, in your life, personal and professional, um, how do you spread your light?
I spread my light. Well, I'll answer it twofold. I spread my light by taking care of me, like you said, because
Mhm.
if I'm burnt out, it's
Yeah,
hard for me to spread the light. But I spread it by just my own unique ways. I spread it by being authentic to me. I know what I like to do. I know, what people may seem as too friendly for me is just being me. So I spread it by maybe saying hello. I spread it. I'm a card person. I may spread it by, spontaneous acts of kindness or, if somebody has to listen to something. But I also find that a unique way that I love to spread light is just by being a source of information to people, whether it's, my friend asking me, hey, can you write this for me? Or, hey, what do you think about this? So I'm going to make this decision. What direction, do you think I should go? Or if somebody's saying, hey, I've written a book. I want to know, do you know a good publisher? Or do you know what steps should I take? I find myself that that's such a powerful way of being a light. And one of the things that has really taught me is that there's so many different ways to be a light,
Mm.
and I think sometimes we may think that if we're not on a stage or if we're not, donating thousands of dollars or hundreds of dollars, that we're not being, effective. But even if you just have a conversation with someone and just
Yes.
encourage them to keep going, even if you write a message like what my teacher wrote to me, that is being a light. And I think if we can just tap into our own unique light, I think we'll not only have better fulfillment and better experiences, but we'll spread it even more. But I think what gets in our way is that number one, the enemy part of it, but also because we get in our own way because I think we think a light has to be shun a certain way, that if we're not doing
Mhm.
certain things, it's really not effective. And I think that's a tactic of the enemy to think that what you're doing isn't enough and that your light is not enough, but it is. It
Yeah,
really is. So that has just been like a breakthrough, for me to help me just spread it.
yeah. And usually it's because we're comparing ourselves with other people
Yes.
without
Yes.
recognizing that
Huge.
there's nobody like you. There'll never be
No,
anybody like you. And that's enough.
no.
That is
Yes.
awesome. So
Yes.
embrace that. Um, we spoke at the very beginning, you mentioned about your work with um, authentic, make allowing women to recover their authentic self. Tell me
Yes.
a little bit more about that.
So it was actually during a counseling session that I was having with a young woman, and just her personality had changed. It had changed. I don't remember the source of the change, but it just changed, and she was just struggling, to be herself. Her people she worked with noticed that she was just like different. And
Yeah,
so just in the middle of that coaching session, sorry, the counseling session, the therapy session, the words just regain your core came to mind, and I just integrated that in the session, but not knowing what it would mean. And later, God just, narrowed down and say, I want that to be your focus because I realized that I was working with women who'd had trauma, who'd lost themselves from relationships, from, setbacks and just heartbreaks, and just to see their life shift because of that loss of themselves, it was just really, it's impactful because one of the things she said was she was not showing up to work the way she normally would, to the point where even people noticed it. And, clients, and to the point where, she told me, she said, hey, the person who I worked with, said, welcome back. And the strange thing was she hadn't gone on
and gone
vacation.
away. Yeah,
But
yeah.
who she was had returned. And when you think about the power of a woman's true self being returned, that impacts how she shows up in spaces, in relationships with her children, with her spouse, how she pursues her wealth, her health. When you know who
Yes,
you are, when you embrace who you are and live it out, it changes everything.
it
It
does.
changes
It
everything.
does. It does. This is especially important, I think, for women who are not just going through trauma in the
Mhm.
normal sense of trauma, and I'm using the word normal
Yeah.
with some excuse, but in terms of women who are experiencing menopause,
Mhm.
because for many women, well, I suppose can be seen as trauma because they're going through a change. Do you think that enough has been done to help women who are experiencing trauma to regain their core?
I think I can't say that it's a tricky question for me because I can't
Mm,
say enough has necessarily not been done. I'm just not sure if that would be my current approach to it. So
mm,
there may be a lot of work being done, but perhaps not in the light that I would
I
necessarily
perceive.
want it to be done.
Mm,
But I don't necessarily think that enough attention is perhaps given to the loss of a woman. Yes, perhaps maybe certain aspects of it, like for example, of course, how she thinks and etc. But how has that impacted her whole entire being as a
okay.
woman? Is she her true self? Is she showing up the way that she wants to show up? Is she
Yeah.
loving the way that she truly wants to love? And
Yes.
I say that because, there was this women, this mom I was working with, and because of trauma and, a history of domestic violence and et cetera, she had created this hardness, but that hardness was flowing over into her relationship with her children, with her fiance, and just affecting other relationships as well. And then, just starting to work together, she just said even her children noticed the difference, that her interactions with them were changing, that there's better communication, better relationships. So there is so much
To
beauty
unpick.
transformation that can happen. So I think attention has been given, not necessarily to the impact of the loss of a woman's self. That's
Mhm.
what I would definitely say to
Yeah.
that.
Do you think a lot of women are aware that they have lost themselves?
I think women are, I think women are aware. I think the challenge is going back to something we said earlier, is that I think a lot of them get stuck in the shame and guilt of how they got there. I think a lot of women are also unaware of how do I move forward from this? Like, how do I get out of this place? But there's a lot of guilt and shame because maybe because of a heartbreak, or maybe because, in search of love or affirmation, you found yourself staying in a relationship that wasn't healthy for you, and you end up just compromising your values and compromising your boundaries. And, you just lose you, but also women can lose themselves in their careers and motherhood. And so I think a challenge for a lot of women is that they just feel a lot of guilt and shame. And then they struggle with, okay, not just how do I move forward, but some women may find a challenge in even being vulnerable about it, because there's this expectation for them to just be strong, or just so put together that just being able to say out loud, hey, I lost myself, it can be difficult.
Yes, yes. Because women have always, as you've said, they've always been expected to be the strong one. And I know I read somewhere recently where somebody said, I don't want to be known as a strong Black woman. I don't,
Yes,
no, I
yes,
want to be known as
no.
soft. I want to be known as
Yes, tender.
fragile.
Yes,
Yes, I don't want to. A lot of people enjoy being called the strong Black woman.
yeah.
I don't want it. It's not a
Yeah.
title I want. And many people would have looked at and said, oh, no, 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 you need to be strong. But
No.
recognizing that being strong is not always the ideal, because everybody looks at you and they forget that you need to be taken care of as well by somebody
Mhm.
else, not just by yourself. Um, I have thoroughly enjoyed talking with you. And as I said to my audience and my listeners, they would be poured into because you would have so much to give them. And I have been truly blessed by our
Thank you.
conversation. I want to
Likewise.
find out from you, what would you say is your light bulb moment
Mhm.
in your journey so far?
That's a broad question. I've had many. I honestly, I've had many, and I'm still going to have them.
Yes,
Because I
yes,
think that's the wonder of God, that's the wonder of life. And I think if you stop having light bulb moments, you wanna wonder,
yes.
hey, what's going
Yes,
on?
going on.
Because
Yes,
I think light bulb moments are meant to happen like more frequently than we think. And I think if we look into everyday life, is just that I just had not a light bulb moment, but I'll just bring this back. When you said, not wanting to subscribe to the idea of strength, I've come to realize that having strength is not a badge
yeah,
that
yes.
try to wear. And I think our perception of strength has been misguided.
Mhm.
We find
Yeah.
strength in perhaps using our hands. We may find strength in being the loudest or being the most dominant. But really, when you look at the meaning of strength, it's different. It's being able to
Yes.
stay poised when someone is perhaps attacking your character. Strength is showing the light of Christ in a very dark place. Strength is being able to maintain your dignity and your character in a situation where you have every opportunity to really retaliate and come out of alignment with your character. So
Yes.
for me, that has been a light bulb moment in the past, just redefining the idea of strength and what that looks like, and just finding that there is more strength in silence, there is more strength in softness than being loud and trying to get your voice heard that way.
Yes.
And so for me, if out of the many just related to what you said, I would say that's a light bulb moment.
Yes. Quiet authority, quiet presence,
Yes, I
but
love that.
powerful. Yes, yes.
Yeah, you
Oh,
listen, it's not the loudest who, it's not
no.
the person who roars the loudest. And as we, just wrap this up, I think of Mufasa. Jesus is the first great example, but I think of like Mufasa in The Lion King when he didn't have
Yes.
to exert his power or authority over Scar
Yes.
for everyone to know that he was the king of the Pride Land.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yes.
you knew Mufasa was king because of how he moved and
His
navigated when
presence.
his aura, he didn't have to roar but he roared when he
Exactly.
had to, just like Jesus turned over the tables and he
Oh,
chastised
yes.
and rebuked when he had to. However, he knew when to use it. And that's another
Exactly.
indicator of strength. So if I would leave anything, that would just be the final thing is that may we have a greater discernment and understanding and just redefining of what strength really
Strength
is,
is.
and to find that in a lot of situations where we find that we're using strength, we're really not. And in the moments when we think we're not using strength, we really are.
There are. Yes, yes. Novia, it has been a joy. It has been a pleasure.
Likewise.
It has been
Likewise.
fantastic listening to you. Very informative and so easy to listen, and so it's been wonderful. So I do
Thank
say
you.
thank you.
Likewise.
My podcast is called It Is Possible Tuesdays with Sanya. What in your life would you say, if you could choose a single moment, what in your life would you say confirms it is possible?
I remember when I was in my early 20s. Definitely I was 20. I was about 21. And I remember after, having my struggles with bullying, I finished undergraduate school and it was time to apply for graduate school. And I remember just wanting to learn about the 2-year program and the 8-month program. And I said, God, I want to do the 8-month program because whatever is there, whatever is, I'm just gonna take the challenge. And I met the requirements. And so I went to meet with this advisor. And, I said to the advisor, you know, I want to apply for this program. And we had no choice but to meet with the advisor. And we started having a conversation. She started asking her questions. And then in the end, she basically told me that you cannot do this program. She said, you're going to fail. And she said, yeah, she did. And she said that I'm going to put it in your file that I told you not to do the program so that not just when you fail, not just if you fail, but when you fail, that they would know that I told you not to do the program. And so I left her office. Literally, I was
Wow.
crying. I was crying. I was so devastated. And I just remember calling my mom and speaking to my mom about it. And then the Holy Spirit just inspired me to call 8 of the closest people to me, and I guess 8 people, 8 months, maybe. But
Yes.
and I did, and I called each of them. And after every phone call, there was like this anxiety or nervousness because I was thinking to myself, well, what if one of them said no? but all eight of them said yes. And in that moment, I realized that they knew more about me and trusted more within me than I did myself. And for me, that just let me know that if they believe in me, that I can do this hard thing, then I can do hard things. And for me, that let me know that one of the moments that really let me know whatever I put my mind to, whatever I believe I can do is possible.
What a fascinating story.
Thank you.
It is indeed possible. And I know that somebody who is listening will say to themselves, this is for me. It is
Yeah.
possible. It may look insurmountable. People may say to me, it is impossible. People may say to me, it's not when you will, it is not if you will fail, but it's when you will fail. And you will say, it is possible that I will not fail.
And I did not. I
Exactly.
graduated in the
You
eight
you
months.
you
Yes,
are a living testimony of what can happen. And I like the fact that you've said you called people, you called your community, you
yes,
called your village, and they were there for you.
yes, yes, they
And
were.
you said they knew you better than you knew yourself. We must always surround ourselves with people who pour into
Yes,
us
yes,
and
have
who
to.
challenge us to be better than who we even dream we could
Yes,
be. It's been fascinating.
thank you.
It has been inspirational.
Thank
I
you.
have been blessed. I we're not shrinking anymore.
No.
We're regaining our core. We're
Yes,
talking about becoming our authentic self. We're
yes,
looking at personally cultivating a relationship with Jesus. We're
yes,
talking about healing. We're
yes,
talking about being sources of information. We're being unique.
yes.
And we're recognizing that indeed it is possible with God.
Yes.
Novia, it has been wonderful. Thank
Thank
you
you.
ever so much
Likewise.
for
I
being my
enjoyed it.
guest
No, thank you
on.
for having me. I really enjoyed it tremendously. I enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you very much. You have been a delight, and I know my listeners are going to be definitely happy listening
Awesome.
to you, hearing. I know they're excited by what they've heard. I know, and I know
Awesome.
they're going to be calling me and saying, that was just beautiful. Can
Oh,
I
thank
get in
you.
touch with her? And so, you know, I'll definitely signpost them to you so
Thank
that
you.
they can make contact with you and continue the conversation on their own with you.
Mhm.
Well, once again, thank you very much for being my guest this evening.
Thank
What a
you for
lovely
having me.
way to enter into 2025,
Yes.
regaining our core,
Yes.
building our relationship with Christ, personally cultivating that relationship. So, my community, my It Is Possible Tuesdays with Sanyo community, remember, be a dreamer, a doer, a thinker.
When
See
I call
possibility
on
everywhere.
Jesus,
Amen.
Because you are
all
alive,
things are
everything is possible. But
possible.
Jesus
I
beheld
can
them
mount on
and said unto
wings
them,
like
with
eagles
men
and
this is impossible,
soar.
but with God
When
all
I
things
call
are
on
possible. Thank you,
Jesus,
and see you
mountains are
in 2 weeks'
gonna
time.
fall. 'Cause he'll move
It's been
heaven and earth
lovely